It links the shippers to their clients on the 3 maritime coasts in North America. It promotes the supply chain to help clients succeed in their markets. It helps North American commercial trades with the rest of the world and stimulates the Canadian economy in its quest to be the most secure railroad in America.
CN has a long and rich history of supporting the club. We are proud to continue to support the Traffic Club during these challenging times and to help our customers, business partners, and industry stakeholders stay connected. We have a great speaker lined up for you today that will cover a topic that's top of mind for many organizations. I hope you enjoy the session and feel free to visit me at table number 3 following the session.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you very much, CN, our major sponsor in North America. We're very happy to have you as our members.
Make sure that our English-speaking guests have access to translation. If in a few moments you're not sure, is it my Russian accent that you still hear, or is it real French? The chances that you're still in the French room, you will need to leave.
So, we want to make sure that the Anglophones have interpretation, and we have the interpretation from Gateway Montreal, which is a sponsor and a great partner of the club.
MGT, a loyal partner to the supply chain and to the success of the vibrant Gateway through Montreal for the past 50 years. Innovating and surpassing expectations by helping to bring products to market in the most reliable and cost-effective way. Montreal Gateway Terminals Partnership, dedicated to your success for the next 50 years.
So before we continue, I would like to let all of the guests know that if there's a problem with the platform, you will receive an email with the link so that you can follow this meeting on an emergency backup platform. I would like to say hello to all of our members, and because of all of your support, the club has continued to innovate and to diversify its activities. As we did and mentioned at the start of the year, the board wants to make sure that the supply chain will remain connected, so we will continue our virtual shift. And we are convinced that during this time of social distancing, it's very important to come together, to work together in order to find solutions and to strengthen business relations. And we're also aware, and I know that we all have, we're a little tired from virtual events, but these virtual events allow us to have a connection without any borders. And I'm very happy to have with us the Toronto Traffic Club and the Chicago Club. And I also like to thank the different entities and people who've had problems connect to the platform, but with perseverance were able to connect to the platform. And we're very happy to welcome the guests from our members who are attending this meeting for the first time. So I hope that you enjoyed networking with our members and that you will join our network, the largest professional for supply chain. And please follow us on social media, and please don't miss the future occasions of discussing different important topics. And the next meeting will be held in April, and it will be a roundtable type of meeting where we will discuss the future of the industry for retail. And we will be with the Retail Council of Canada. So before I introduce our special guest, I would like to thank another important partner of the club and a sponsor, a prestige sponsor, Administration Portuaire de Montréal. Thank you very much for your continuous support over the years and for your contribution to the prosperity of our members.
The Port of Montreal has always been a preferred destination for marine carriers for many reasons. Internationally recognized as a leader in innovation, the Port of Montreal has continuously renewed and optimized its infrastructures in order for everyone to benefit from its exceptional geographic setting. Located on the majestic St. Lawrence River, 1,600 kilometers from the Atlantic coast, it's at the very heart of North America and privileges inland access. This strategic position makes it possible to quickly reach thousands of businesses and distribution centers in Eastern Canada, in Ontario, the Midwest, and the Northeastern United States. Trucks and trains can reach and serve more than 110 million consumers in as little as 48 hours. As the second largest port in Canada and Quebec's only container port, the Port of Montreal is a diversified transshipment center handling all types of cargo, whether containerized, oversized, liquid bulk, or dry bulk. It also welcomes more than 100,000 cruise passengers per year. Unique in North America, Montreal is a destination port without stopover, where ships are 100% loaded and unloaded, promoting efficiency and cost optimization regardless of the size of the ship. Furthermore, our carriers' direct services with transshipment ports in Europe, the Mediterranean, and the Caribbean connect Eastern Canada and the industrial heartland of North America with more than 140 countries around the world. Served by the world's largest marine carriers, the Port of Montreal handles more than $40 billion worth of merchandise each year, making it an important economic engine for the country. A vital link in the North American supply chain, the Port of Montreal is connected to a vast network of highways and pipelines. The Port of Montreal has always been recognized for the fluidity of its operations. It also owns its integrated network of railways on the wharves, which allows it to assemble Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Rail convoys directly at the terminals. This advantage results in a shorter container dwell time, which is on average much shorter than that recorded at ports on the east coast of North America. Always seeking innovative solutions to meet logistics challenges, protect the environment, and gain efficiency in all its activities, the Port of Montreal is recognized today for its leadership in the development of smart solutions aimed at offering a fluid, human, and sustainable world to its employees, partners, and neighboring communities. With an evolving marine industry and tremendous development prospects on the horizon, the Port of Montreal's future looks brighter than ever.
So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speakers. Arnaud Mangematin, a consultant in organizational resilience, and he'll talk to us about a very important topic for our members, cybersecurity. Marco has quite an expertise in 2013. He obtained as cyber management at the Sorbonne University in France, and then he held a different consultant position in France. And he also taught at Université de Paris in 2019. Arnaud arrived to Montreal, where he joined CGI, a multinational, a Canadian company, and this is an information technology company. Welcome, Arnaud. So, knowing the members of the Traffic Club, I'm certain that everyone is applauding you right now. So, Arnaud, risks are part of your daily activities, and I'm sure that you have many activities to talk to us about. And I would like for you to tell us a little more about your role at CGI and tell us about cyber threats. Well, thank you. And thank you, Marina, for this invitation. Thank you for inviting me to talk to the Montreal Traffic Club. So, as you've mentioned, I accompany companies to face major risk scenarios, including cyber risks. I work at CGI. I actually had joined CGI in France before coming to Montreal, and CGI guides different companies with their virtual shifts, technological shifts. I'm part of 1,500 experts around the world and 50 members in Montreal. And to answer the two questions that was just asked, I have this agenda for today. So First, I will start with a concrete case to try and illustrate with you what a cyber crisis is. And then I will give you 10 tips so that you can prepare for these cyber crises. We'll come back to that later on, and then we will have a Q&A session, and I'll be very happy to answer any of your questions at that time. And if you feel comfortable with the agenda, I suggest that we take a look at the concrete case. So the concrete case I decided to present to you today is the cyber crisis that affected Merck in 2017. Why did I select this case? Well, for several reasons. First of all, as a leader in maritime shipping, I thought that this was certainly an example that you could really identify to. So I wanted to present you this case with public information without revealing any secrets or any confidential information. So this is a typical case, and I'm sure that we can draw from some lessons from this case. And so this started in Ukraine in June 2017, and I'm not going to go over all the geopolitical situation. And in the morning of June 27th, 2017, hundreds saw the NotPetya malware enter their system. NotPetya is a malware which attacks the Microsoft Windows system, and then it goes into the networks just as a worm, and it's presented as a ransomware, so you have no possibility of recovering your data by giving a ransom, because it's a wiper-type malware that destroys the systems. So what's interesting in this story is that Merck was using a software, and a Ukrainian provider for their software, for their tax payment software. And it's through that software that Merck was infected. And after this first infection, it only took 7 minutes only, before all of the computers and servers from Merck infected all through the world. So in 7 minutes, it's 50,000 servers, and the website that are no longer usable. So can you imagine how complicated this can be for a business, especially a transportation business, to take in new orders and manage the orders that are ongoing? They no longer know which orders they have, who the containers belong to, where they're headed, etc. And the computer systems from Merck were unavailable for over 4 weeks until they were able to rebuild them and made available once again for the employees. Also, you have 100,000 employees that you have to cut, and of course they were very, very busy trying to repair what was happening. So this cost over $300 million in repair, and $1.25 billion in terms of operational losses for the company, because they were not able to operate during this period of time. So, a few lessons. The company was impacted by a third party connected to their system. The vulnerability used was known, and it was the same vulnerability that had been employed by WannaCry a few weeks or months prior to that attack. And the company was unavailable for 4 weeks, so they needed to prepare to be able to function without a computer system, and they were impacted all through the world at once. So this is a good transition to give you the different characteristics of cyber crisis. First, I would like to tell you what a crisis is and a cyber crisis. So a crisis is an unusual situation that can be unsettling. It can sometimes wipe a company, and it, of course, requires an implementation of temporary governance in order to manage a crisis. And the one will be, for example, a crisis management system or emergency crisis units. So basically, it's not normal functioning, but it's the functioning of a company facing a crisis. So in your sector, I'm certain that you've faced different crises, perhaps accidents or pollution, etc. But today, here we are talking about cybercrisis. What is cybercrisis? Well, cybercrisis stems from the cyberspace, and it is linked to your information systems. It could be, for example, leakage of very confidential data, the unavailability of your industrial systems. It could be a ransomware on your management systems. And these cyber crises, compared to crisis, have certain things that are common. They're unusual, unsettling, and you very often need an investigation to understand what is happening. When there's a fire, you see the fire, you know how to react. But cyber crises are more difficult to detect and to react to, and they can last for weeks. Very often they will evolve. When you've been attacked, there's a breach, perhaps the things will continue to evolve and become worse and worse. And very often, the scope of these attacks are broad, very wide. So it is all of your organization that is impacted around the world. Well, when there's an accident, for example, it occurs at one specific site. You will not have an accident that will be reproduced all over the world. So this requires these cyber crises, very specific expertise. And these, of course, need readiness.
On a amené, Arnaud, j'ai envie de sonder un peu notre audience aujourd'hui. Donc, dans quelques secondes, chers participants, vous allez voir sur vos écrans, en sondage, en direct, à faire part de notre commanditaire offre, Essor Assurance. Et je vous invite à répondre à une seule question. Sur une échelle de 1 à 5, dans quelle mesure êtes-vous prêt à faire face à une cybercrise? Donc, j'attends le message de studio que le sondage est lancé. Et je tiens d'ailleurs à remercier Essor Assurance pour sa contribution à l'événement et pour son soutien au club. Essor est notre assureur depuis plusieurs nombreuses années, vous savez, Arnaud, et je suis très heureuse qu'il y a plusieurs années, notre courtier nous a approché pour dire est-ce que vous pensez les cybermenaces, est-ce que vos infrastructures sont assez protégées? Et je suis heureuse, après avoir entendu cette histoire, que nous avons bien écouté notre courtier Essor Assurance et nous avons pris une couverture pour le cyberattaque. En attendant que, je ne sais pas si nous avons reçu les résultats de sondage, on va poursuivre, on va présenter dès que les résultats seront disponibles. Donc, Arnaud, maintenant que nous avons déterminé quelles sont les cyberattaques existantes et comment elles peuvent nous aider, donc moi je pense qu'on a une mission de donner des outils à nos participants de se préparer. Vous savez que les plénières n'avaient pas de cybercriminalité, on l'a vu même avant que l'Internet existait, mais maintenant avec l'Internet qui grandit, les cyberattaques aussi deviennent plus sophistiquées. mettons, c'est bon, je vais répondre les éléments. Donc, Arnaud, je vais vous laisser nous expliquer maintenant quelles clauses on peut mettre en place pour se protéger. Et avant ça, donc, je vous cède la parole, j'en ai une partie de nos participants que vous pouvez envoyer vos questions tout au long de la présentation d'Arnaud. Donc, on va les regarder suite à sa présentation. Donc, la parole est à vous.
Merci, Arnaud. Juste avant d'entrer sur les conseils que vous nous donnez, on va juste revenir sur
crisis. So they're going to send you a ransomware and see what is available. So this is something that we can identify. So the summer when I moved to Montreal, we saw a malicious employee here in the Quebec area who went around the sources of threats that can be undermining your systems. So those are the various motivations and threat scenarios that you saw on that slide. Now, here are some tips for facing a cyber crisis. What you must understand is that there's no miracle solution. There's no panacea against all of this to protect you. However, what I can tell you is that if you're not ready, it's going to be very difficult for you to react to a cyber crisis. So you have to be ready. So you have to develop the technological capacities that are going to reduce the probability and reduce also the impact and the intensity of such a threat may have on your company. So here are some of the tips that I'd like to share with you. As you can see on the screen, most of these things that you have to do before the threat, before the crisis. So you have to anticipate what's coming down the pipeline, so to speak. So my first piece of advice is that you have to know your organization very well, all the ins and outs of your organization and its potential threats. Then you have to improve your information security posture so that and then monitor, detect, and manage incidents. Adapt your crisis management system so that you can take into account cyber crisis. Prepare for business continuity. Anticipate cyber crisis communications. Organize simulations. And then consider cyber insurance. We talked about that a bit before when Marina was talking about SOR insurance. Now, some more advice in detail for knowing your organization. So if you have more specific questions, please do not hesitate. I'll be more than happy to answer. My first tip was to know your organization. Now, why is this important? Because you'll be able to know your organization's priorities to identify the risk to which it is exposed, identify and prepare the potential threats, have a checklist, and know the resources and capacities that can react. So then you'll get your risk profile within your organization and do the mapping of it all. Is it a small risk, or will there be a breach of data? Will there be a theft of data? So on. And then you have to go, what is the impact, and look at which one are essentials, which one are need to be protected. For the environment, you have to look at your regulatory environment. Let's say you're using personal information, and with the legislation in place, with regarding to privacy. You must have enhanced protection of privacy data. And you also have to do a scan of the situation. Look at your peers. In the Montreal Traffic Club, you could probably share some information on these various tools and ways of going about it. And also identify the technical expertise within your teams. Would they be able to carry out a forensic analysis if ever you were attacked? And in managing your assets, are you really aware of all your assets, material, all your hardware and software, the version that's being used? Are there vulnerabilities? Because on a given version there may be a vulnerability. Are you aware of all of this? Now, moving on to my second tip is to improve your information security posture. Now, why is this important? Because you can probably reduce the probability and the impact of a cyber crisis on your system. And just to give you a figure, on average, businesses spend 10% of their IT on security. So that might be one way to benchmark yourselves according to the average spend. And here on this screen, you have the various security domains that stem from the ISO 27002 standard security controls. You can use another one if you will, but you have to have a structured approach for your security in your organization. In your major organizations, have cybersecurity programs in place. But for smaller ones, they do some things security-wise, but it's not necessarily structured. So I would suggest to you to take it into account what you have, really do a look in depth of what you have and really improve your security capability and resources and find where is the weakest link to be able to improve it. Moving on to the third tip now. This is related more to operations. To put in place solutions, technological solutions to be able to monitor, detect and manage incidents on a daily basis to some extent. So it can be the various detection of intruders. It can be the SIEM, the Security Information and Event Management type of situations that you can use, or it can be other ones, the endpoint detection, so and response, the EDRs. So there are some organizations don't even have a IT team, so you can outsource these resources or insource them if you do have it, and to make sure that they have the various steps in place so that you can look at the scalable steps that need to be put in place. So if there's a ransomware that pops up on the screen, right away you cut the Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi network. You unplug it immediately. So that type of response must be known by all of your employees. Moving on now to the fourth one: adapt your crisis management system or emergency crisis situation so that it can take into account cyber crisis attacks. I know that you probably have processes in place when you're dealing with a crisis. So just thinking of the pandemic, how did you manage under the pandemic crisis? How did you regroup resources, physical or human resources? So that's good to have a crisis plan in place, how to manage it, but that's good. Now, if you allow me, I'll just have a sip of water because I'm a bit warm. Now, my advice is that you have in parallel a crisis center that is focused on cyber attacks because there will be issues that deal with operations, be able to communicate with your partners, and that will deal with the corporate crisis management, and the cyber crisis cell will deal with the computer attack per se. So I'm gonna let you decide how you set up the corporate crisis unit or the cyber crisis unit. It's up to you to decide, but basically you are three functions. You must gather information, take stock of the situation, take decisions, and then communicate it internally and outside as to all the decisions that have been taken. Now, for the cyber crisis unit, you can give them the same basic principles, as the corporate crisis unit. It's going to be a permanent crisis unit 24/7 throughout the year, because the cyber crisis won't wait to hit you on a Wednesday or on a Friday or a Saturday. Oftentimes it does happen on the weekend. So usually for the cyber crisis unit, it has to be permanent. It has to be complementary. Subsidiarity, it means it goes from local to all the way up. Unified communications, it means that everyone has to be on the same page. Everyone has to, the message content has to be shared by everyone, and it has to be a consistent message regardless of the platforms you use. There has to be transparency between the various stakeholders and the various managers of the crisis, and you must be fully equipped, fully tooled whenever you do receive an alarm or to provide communications. And when I talk about tools, I'm not talking about technological tools, but it's probably information that you can share online so that you can be effective and efficient. You're talking about a crisis room, like what we might call a war room or a crisis unit. It's some dedicated room, so to speak, in a given organization that focuses only on that cyber attack, and that in that cyber crisis or war room or crisis room, it would be important to have workstations that are not connected to the other servers of the organizations. I worked in an organization, so they even had tin cans so that the servers could work. And they had backup food basically, so that they could just stay there with a fridge and so on and so forth. So a true war room, so to speak. Now, my next tip is to prepare for business continuity. Now, what does this mean, business continuity? So when you're dealing with an IT unavailability, be it human resources or IT resources, that you be in a position to provide services for which you're hired, or which is the reason why you're in business. Now, for a cyber crisis, your IT are going to be impacted. So what does it mean to prepare a business continuity plan for IT? It means to foresee all all that's required to continue to operate? Is it going to be done manually? They're no longer going to come in through our website or through software. So clients might be able to call us and we'll be able to take their orders on phone, or maybe we'll have to do all of this manually, face to face. But anyways, you can reinvent D-Day. But if you have procedures in place and you've thought this through, then you'll be ready whenever the attack comes. The next thing is to have a IT recovery backup plan. A disaster recovery plan is what we call it in English, and sometimes in French too. So let's say that your IT system is completely destroyed and you cannot use it, you have to rebuild them from scratch. So you have to have safe backup plans in place. And this is where things get difficult sometimes, because the attackers can be in your system for months at a time. And even if your backups are corrupted, you'll have to go back to a number of months to find a safe backup. So do your backups on a regular basis and do them external backups.
So you also need to make sure that all of your solutions or resilience toward a cyber attack. For example, you need to have tools available outside of your company in order to manage these cyber crises. So my next tip would be to anticipate the cyber crisis communications. Of course, all of the crisis communication tools must be accessible. You have to ensure that you have means to communicate even if your information systems are down. But also what I wanted to mention is that very often the people who will communicate for you are not necessarily experts in expert situations. For example, if you talk to them about a ransomware, they won't necessarily know exactly how to simplify this information in order to broadcast it to the rest of the public. Perhaps you're not a company that needs to communicate publicly. You still need to communicate the information to your business partners, so you need to be able to simplify the information. For example, you can organize meetings between the experts and the people who are responsible for the communications in your company. So I'll try to speed up a little bit, but it's important to have the communication experts well prepared. So my next tip is to organize crisis simulations. A plan that you have but never tested is just as if you didn't have any plan. So it's very important to organize simulations where you will train and to try and react to hypothetical situations. Then you'll be able to test your cyber crisis unit, your corporate crisis unit. Exercises are very useful to train, to improve, to test. How many times have I seen when we organized simulations that sometimes people would meet during these tests? That's true in large companies, but it also allows to create more confident people who've worked together during a simulation or a test will work better together in a real situation later on. My other tip, and I think Marina already talked about it, is cyber insurance. I'm not here to tell you to opt for the cyber insurance, but please ask yourself the question, is this part of mitigating risks? You can avoid risks, mitigate risks, or transfer risks. And an insurance will basically help you transfer the risk to an insurance company. And there are different uses for these insurances, and you can certainly do a benchmark. You can get in touch with your insurer or the partner of the club. Very often, cyber insurance will enable the intervention of technical team of experts. Often, insurers will have teams of expert partners who will help you for the forensic portion of the incident and will help you get rid of the threat and rebuild your system. My next tip was on the golden rules for crisis management. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you will be receiving the slides after the presentation, so you'll be able to see them, print them, post them, communicate these rules, these golden rules, to everyone. But you do have a few minutes, Arnaud, if you want to talk about these golden rules. Well, thank you. When you need to face a crisis, in order to be efficient, of course, you need to be sure that there's rapid detection and early warning. And you need to make sure that your crisis unit will be mobilized quickly. I suggest that you analyze the immediate impacts for your corporation, but also the potential impacts. How could this situation be even more impactful? And then you have to ensure the traceability, the management of the event. That's very often important if there is an investigation afterwards, and also it will help you to learn from the situation. Then you need to share information transparently within the crisis management system. So that's also very important. I've already spoken about that. You need to ensure appropriate internal and external communication. And don't forget that everything that you will say internally, despite the loyalty of your employees nowadays with social network, anything that you say internally is as if you've communicated it externally. Never forget, of course, your partners and collaborators when communicating information. You also have to anticipate possible developments of the situation. You need to ask for help. Don't hesitate to ask for help. And perhaps another rule, try to transform a crisis into an opportunity. We often say that you should never let crisis go without being checked. So if you face a crisis one day, take advantage of this crisis to invest more into security, and all of the rules you wanted to pass will certainly be implemented after a crisis. And my last tip, last but not the least, you will come out of this crisis and you'll want to come back to, regular activities, normal activities. But please take the time to learn from what has happened so that you will not replicate what has happened, that you will correct any problems that you had, and you will rebuild. And it's important to understand the parameters of the event. You have to brief and see what has worked well, what has not worked well to manage the crisis. And this will enable you to implement an action plan. And the follow-up of an action plan is also very important when you review the crisis. So basically, these were the tips that I wanted to share with you. And my conclusion is the following. So if you implement all of these tips to prepare for a cyber crisis, you'll also be able to manage crises of lesser consequence, and you'll be able to avoid losses. So I hope that this afternoon, when you go back to work, you will really take a look around the organization to take a look at the strengths and weaknesses and threats, and yet you will improve your information security posture and always monitor to detect and manage incidents, adapt your crisis management system. You'll prepare for business continuity, anticipate cyber crisis communications, organize simulations, consider cyber insurance, and Don't forget also to follow the golden rules for crisis management and learn from the lessons. Arnaud, could you go back to the previous slide? Or perhaps we don't need to post the slide, but we've received several questions. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for all of your tips. And we'll come to the question period. And this is presented by Transport Routier Inside Logistics. This is a platinum sponsor, and the first choice of readers in members of the supply chain. So here we have questions per themes. So we see that the reality today is remote working. You know that more and more experts agree to say that there are millions of employees who will work from home or will basically go around with their laptops and portable. So, Arnaud, is this a threat, a considerable threat? And if it is, how can we protect ourselves? Well, of course, we had remote work or telework before the pandemic, so it isn't new. And telework is not a threat in itself, but it can increase risk, especially with the pandemic. We now have millions of people who are not used to working from home. Even people from, would do telework with their personal devices rather than corporate devices that are monitored. For example, if you're at home with your family computer, the children use this computer, and potentially there are malware, then you could infect the company network from your personal computer. And a lot of communication tools were added because of their functionality that were very collaborative, without wondering about safety or security. So often you need to think when you want to implement a new solution, make sure to integrate security in these projects, do a risk analysis, and if there are risks, implement security controls. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and it just... Okay. Oh, yes, we were talking about telework. Those people who work alone at home or isolated at home are sometimes more susceptible to be caught from phishing attempts. We saw a lot of phishing attempts at the beginning of the pandemic. These hackers adapted their fraud and phishing attempt, and there are other attempts of fraud to the president, but sometimes they ask you to click or invite you to click on links, and all this requires a good collaboration from members. But, well, what I understand is that you have to tell employees about what can happen if they use their personal devices. Yes, absolutely. You need to raise the awareness of the collaborators. That's important. And it's also part of your responsibility, your corporate responsibility. If your employees are well trained and they know what the security good practices are, and they implement them at work, they will implement those same procedures at home. So they will be Canadians or Americans that are not as vulnerable. Thank you. That's very good. So there are ways to prevent this problem. The next question. I know this member from Traffic Club of Montreal asking this question. We're talking about tomorrow's virtual or digital ecosystem. For example, these systems that will manage traffic automatically. This will be based on 5G or blockchain. We hear a lot about those systems. So do you think that our data will be in a cloud? Is it more protected when it's in a cloud, or are we more exposed? Well, many things in these questions. I will try to respond to several things. So if these new technologies are replacing solutions that are obsolete, well, in any case, it will improve the security of your organization. But then all the new solutions come with new risks and new threats. So what is important is to analyze the risks prior to the implementation of new solutions. Do you want to share information? The question about the cloud. I think that we can trust, especially the major actors in the cloud, to ensure the integrity, confidentiality of your data. But just before Christmas, I didn't want to mention them, but Google had problems of availability, so it can happen to them too. So don't put all your eggs in the same basket. Use these services in all confidence, but make sure to have a backup of your more sensitive data. So yes, if you want to improve your performance, you can use new solutions, new technologies, and these will certainly enable to increase the security, because these new technologies also have new security. So perfect. We will follow your recommendations internally.
Now, two questions that you might see on the screen. You talked about to simulate a plan of action. That's a very good initiative. Where are our weaknesses and where are the improvements that need to be carried out? So tomorrow, we go back to our offices. What would be the first exercise? Answer. Well, you can do simulations or exercise on various cyber scenarios. I think you should start with a breach of data. Start with that would be my recommendation, because your corporate crisis unit, they're usually at the leaders, they're concerned about data breach and be made aware of this situation. It allows also to improve communication in-house, and it's not too technical. And then, as time goes by, that you can work with a ransomware that's going to block your system, and people can no longer use their workstations. And then you can do a more technical simulation with the advanced APT. It's a threat where you have to see who is the attacker, it's been there for how long, and start the inquiry based on false journals. Of course, all of this is a simulation, and this will test your business continuity plan. Two follow-up questions based on what you presented a bit earlier. Well, actually, I'd like to ask you two questions. We think we can put in place a given simulation, and we have to meet up with our crisis unit. Can we do a crisis unit virtually? Or do we have to be there in person and be available? Answer. Well, depending on the type of business, I had a discussion recently that during the pandemic and remote workers, it's for white-collar workers because they can work from home. But if you're in a plant, a blue-collar worker, they're not remote working. But if everyone is at home, the essential part of the crisis unit that is currently teleworking, and you have a solution to remote connect. So use your regular tools, but if you have a solution that allows you to remote connect, it can be standard ones like WhatsApp, Telegram, or all the messaging systems out there, but that allows you to connect outside your organization system if you think your system has been compromised. So you have to anticipate, prepare. So yes, you have to be a bit pessimistic. What could happen? So you have to prepare for the worst case scenario, basically. Thank you. Now, two questions. You talked about this plan of action to integrate your teams together so the teams work together. But for the traffic club, we can't have the IT team permanently on site or external experts on site. Do you have something comparable that you could share with us? So maybe you could federate all of these people so that they could share systems in the supply chain. That would be one way of going about it. And I said a bit earlier, I said monitor your systems. Because if you do not monitor, you won't know that someone has attacked and stolen some of your data or breached your system. So you need someone to monitor on a permanent basis. There should be dedicated staff doing that. So can you outsource that activity? Well, maybe you can have a partnership with a SOC, Security Operations Center, and they can monitor your systems or machines or computers or whatever, and based on the subscription, the cost is on the number of machines being monitored. And one last question, someone would like to know, and you mentioned this in your presentation, we've thought it through, everything's in place for our own systems, but one of our partners or suppliers has been attacked. And how can we protect ourselves from that type of attack coming from a third party or a supplier? Answer: you won't be able to know what happened at a third party unless there's a communication that takes place or unless it's made public. I don't have a good answer for that. On the server here, there's another question. How can we know if we've been hacked by someone by the outside, from the outside? But I think, yeah, it links into the one I mentioned previously. So it's not easy to detect. It's not easy to know that you've been hacked or not, but there's some tools to see if you're vulnerable or not, if you're attackable. So you can have scans on vulnerability on your machines, on your computers, or you can do pen testers to see intrusion testers. Maybe you already do intrusion tests physically to see if your physical security is effective. People who will try to jumping over a gate or by pretending that there's somebody else and they have a meeting with so-and-so, but that's physical. But in the cyberspace, it's the same thing. The cyber criminals, I'm talking about consultants who are going to test your security and are going to try to undermine your systems. Just to show you this is how we can do. This is what a malicious person could do on your system. So then you'll know if you are easily attackable or not. And then you can put in place the patch and the corrective measures. So it means that you have to have a clearly defined plan of action. Yes, absolutely. I think this brings to a close our Q&A. So, yes, we've answered all of the questions, but once again, I'd like to have a direct survey that's offered by SA Assurance, the same question on a scale of 1 to 5. To what extent are you ready to deal with a cyber crisis? We hope that the answers will change now, and we hope that the clients will be ready to face a cyber crisis. Waiting for the response of the survey, I'd like to say thank you, Arnaud, for your presentation, for your tips. I'd like to thank CGI, that is a member of the club and a partner. Thank you, Montreal Gateway Terminal, Port of Montreal, SR Assurance, Transport Routier, Inside Logistics, all these sponsors. Thank you for helping us to stay connected. I'd like to thank the technical team and the interpreters. Thank you very much for your work. And I'd like to thank as well all the participants who have joined us today. That's part of our success story. And we'll send you a little message through chat. And there's a survey also through chat. We'd like your opinion. What do you think of this virtual presentation? What is your experience with this virtual presentation? And we'd like to know your opinion with regards to this topic that we had with our guest speaker. So now, let's see on a scale of 1 to 5, how prepared are you to face a cyber crisis? So we see those that are more ready now. So Arnaud, there's a lot of work cut out for you, and our clients also have a lot of work to do. So in fact, I think the clients that are at that level that are not really ready to face a cyber crisis, maybe they can get in touch with Arnaud, and you'll be able to clarify some points. So tomorrow morning, we'll be sending you his presentation in both languages, in French and in English, as well as his personal information, so that you'll be able to contact him and get more specific answers if you so wish. And now in the networking room, you'll be able to continue the discussions. For the English guests, you have to leave the translation room and you have to go back to the networking space. Thank you very much, Arnaud. Enjoy the networking discussion and have a nice day. Thank you very much.